Hi there, it's Strutter, and today is May 29th, 2020, and it's the 75th day of my lockdown diary. Before I get to the title story, I wanted to mention another thing or two, and the first one is an article from the province here in BC, and they have extended the state of emergency for another 2 weeks. Not a surprise, but very unfortunate, as that means very few rights for the people and complete control by government and a very, very powerful state right now, and that doesn't seem to be changing. They say it will not change. It says there's no end in sight of that. And so once they've gotten that state of emergency, they're probably not going to give it up. And the article also mentions here, as you can see in the center in the graphic, it says it may not go away for a year or two. Now they're definitely saying, or maybe many years. Okay, great. An article in CNN today by Brian Stelter is talking about how arresting reporters at a protest is an attack on the First Amendment. And so this is the mainstream media crying about the First Amendment, and this is the mainstream media that is in bed with big tech, that is censoring anyone who disagrees with the mainstream media right now. So they absolutely do not believe in the First Amendment, and I've even documented that directly many times. And hell, myself and my wife, Medicady, could be considered journalists. We record what goes on at protests. We've been to many cannabis protests, for example, in Vancouver, and she was arrested at one while we were doing journalism there. So arresting reporters at a protest, there was no mainstream media there to defend us when we were arrested as media, as reporters at the events that we were documenting. So here they are crying about it here, and it just, it sounds so hollow for the mainstream media to be saying, oh, we deserve the First Amendment rights, like they care about the Constitution, like they care, only when it suits them. It looks like JT has hit puberty, but maybe he still hasn't grown a pair, as he goes to any length to prove his obedience and Canada's diminished status to elite global powers. As I read highlights of this CBC article, which is linked below, notice how many times variations on the word global are used. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau led a call for global cooperation today at a major UN meeting aimed at mitigating the devastating social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Trudeau opened the hours-long video conference by affirming Canada's support for the international health institutions he said should be leading the recovery. For the global economy to recover, and for our domestic economies to bounce back, we need a global, coordinated plan, Trudeau said. Our citizens need to have confidence in international institutions that leave no one behind and are capable of overcoming global challenges. More than 50 heads of state and government participated in the meeting, including Germany's Angela Merkel, France's Emmanuel Macron, and the UK's Boris Johnson, along with representatives of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the private sector. US President Donald Trump did not take part. Trump has argued that wise leaders put the interests of their own countries first. One by one, Merkel, Macron, Johnson, the President of the European Commission, and the Prime Ministers of Norway and Ireland, among others, trashed Trump's approach. They defended the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement on climate change, from which Trump is withdrawing. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen noted the pandemic might push some countries to focus on their own needs. Macron, who has shied away from criticizing Trump, said collective action by the world's multilateral systems is crucial. Quote, no single country can find a solution to this crisis. There can be no isolated solution. We have to address issues collectively, such as health, the environment, justice, said Macron. The price is paid by all. The solution must be found by all, end quote. Johnson, sometimes viewed as Trump's political kindred spirit, said all countries are striving to protect their people as they should. Quote, yet no single country holds the keys to victory against our invisible enemy, he added. If we are to defeat COVID-19, achieve a global recovery, and avoid a future pandemic, then we must work together across borders. Norway's Prime Minister Erna Solberg said, quote, "Let us use this moment to ensure more global cooperation in order to build a healthier, greener, fairer, gender equal, and sustainable world." Canada is competing with Norway and Ireland for one of two non-permanent seats opening on the UN Security Council. Canada is running on a platform of helping to rebuild the post-pandemic world. Trudeau has been courting the support of various large voting blocs in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean because European countries are expected to rally around Norway and Ireland. Unless countries come together now to coordinate a recovery plan, the UN estimates the pandemic could slash nearly $10 trillion from the world economy over the next 2 years, forcing 34 million people into extreme poverty this year and 130 million more over the course of the decade. Quote, "This is our chance to begin a conversation on how we can emerge from this truly global crisis as a stronger and more cohesive world, one that creates growth for everyone, addresses inequality, and cares for the most vulnerable," Trudeau said Thursday. Canada is ready to do our part as we help bring the world together in the fight against COVID-19. The UN said all countries face economic strains due to the pandemic, particularly developing countries, which were already in debt distress before the crisis and can't afford to cushion the blow for their citizens or to undertake fiscal stimulus measures. And there are 6 urgent areas of action to mobilize the financing needed for a global recovery. So this is what we need to do to get the money needed to defeat this virus and other issues involved with it. 1. Expanding liquidity in the global economy for maintaining financial stability. In other words, more debasement of the fiat currencies through quantitative easing and stimulus. 2. Addressing debt vulnerability for developing countries to save lives around the world. In order to enslave lives around the world, is what they actually probably mean. 3. Involving private sector creditors in recovery plans. Private sector involvement is a very specific term, and it essentially means austerity. It's, I guess, the new word, private sector involvement, the new term, the new catchphrase, like QE and all those other stimulus and all these different things that we've learned over the last 10, 15 years. Another one coming now is, I guess, private sector involvement. So basically think Greece in 2012. 4. Enhancing external financing for inclusive growth and job creation. And external financing, I don't know what that means. I know what that means, but what does it mean in the context of the globe? What's external to the globe? I don't know, maybe they're talking about private banks. I don't know. 5. Preventing illicit offshore financial holdings and money laundering that siphon off trillions of dollars. Not sure where they're going with that one. We got to make sure we don't lose money to fraud, okay? And 6, aligning recovery policies with sustainable development goals. Just feel-good political jargon. And it says, the conference aims to create a discussion group in each of the 6 areas with the goal of providing concrete proposals by mid-July. So within the next couple of months, they are going to basically decide the new world order, the shape, the form, and the function of the new world order, and we're going to see what it looks like in the next 2 months. Quote, "Despite all the technological and scientific advances of recent decades, we are in an unprecedented human crisis because of a microscopic virus," said the UN. Quote, "We need to respond with unity and solidarity." So basically, we're all in this together with a rainbow, right? Like all of us, everybody, like it or not. And rule breakers will not be tolerated. Countries and individuals must get in line or be demonized by the others as the common enemy. More globalism and one world financial governance brought to us on the back of this crisis, which the powers that be are certainly not letting go to waste. And Canada's leading the way. Stay well out there.